It's Chris over Dixieland Farm, and this is going to probably be a long video, long rambling video, but hopefully you will enjoy it. I picked up a Grail for Me. It's a reissue. It was $11 on Amazon. When I show you the album in a couple of seconds, you will go, oh, why am I even watching this video? Bo Jonker has an original of this. I think Matt Sands does as well. I never found an original, and this is the album that I've got the second most copies of, but not on vinyl. Pet Sounds is number one. I have the most copies of Pet Sounds, and this album now I've got the most copies of, number two. And when I was a kid, a teenager, compact discs were just coming out. And so a lot of my music collection, instead of going and getting the vinyl, I got the CD because that's what was coming out at the time. They were close in price at certain retailers like the Wiz, which is sort of like a Circuit City. Both are gone. Or Tower Records opened up near me in two different places. So, and CDs were great because they were digital and they were read with lasers, like science fiction, right? And I had this book. It was a little guide written by a rock journalist, and it would tell you whether the vinyl copies were better than the CD copies of rock albums from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And that book was very influential because you'd read a little bit, and they were only like a paragraph on, kind of albums that every rock critic would have, who wrote for Rolling Stone and, important albums. So you'd learn a little bit about those albums. And that gave me my kind of background of what was out there and what maybe I should go and explore and find. Back then, you had to actually buy those albums. You couldn't just go online and listen to them, or Spotify, and just automatically be exposed. You had to purchase these albums. And over time, I couldn't get these things on CD anymore, and I started finding these albums on vinyl. They weren't put out on CD, and so that's where I started picking more vinyl up. Anyway, this band was listed in the 60s and the 70s, just two albums, and it was the beginning of the career and the end of the career. So I picked up the CD of this. I must have been 14, and this, along with I can name the 3 or 4 albums that totally shaped my music tastes and journey, and this is certainly one of them. So Tom Petty's "Let Me Up, I Had Enough" was definitely one of them. Elton John's "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road" was definitely one of them. The Who, "Tommy" was definitely one of them. And this compact disc, when I was, I guess, 13 or 14, the Velvet Underground, "Loaded," on Warner Special Products. So I still have the original CD, obviously, and I also have the lenticular Rhino reissue, which also has outtakes, basically the demo versions of the albums, and just songs that were cut out that ended up being on, a lot of them showed up on Transformer. And now I guess we can do a sealed to revealed. So this is the Rhino reissue for $11. I couldn't let it go, and I do have one more copy of it. I'm using a guitar pick to open it, and there we go. So popped open on the Cotillion record label. So after they were dropped on, so it's just a plain black 180 gram. They were dropped from MGM Verve. Cotillion Atlantic picked them up, and then the band broke up and fell apart. Velvet Underground is an influential band, and I'll get into just a little bit of history of it. And some of the Velvet Underground history is flawed and filled with lies, just like me. So you see Mo Tucker, Maureen Tucker, the female drummer, is listed on this album. She does not play on this album. Billy Ewell plays on this album. Doug Ewell's brother, his teenage brother. He would go to high school during the day, and he would, in the evening, play at Max's Kansas City with the band. And he also played on this. And his drumming style is very different than Maureen Tucker. Maureen Tucker was not the original drummer, but she, for the recorded output, she was. The story goes, whether it's true or not, is that I Lou Reed and I think it was John Cale, or it may have been Sterling Morrison, or it may have been all three of them, were just walking around, and in Manhattan they heard this crazy primal drumming playing, and it was Maureen Tucker, and the way she played was stand-up drums. She played basically a tom, a snare, and a bass drum with mallets. She played while standing up. She didn't play like a drummer like Billy Ewell, who is not listed on this album. So this album is called Loaded, for loaded with hits, says Lou Reed. Is that true? Don't know. But this is definitely a plain old straight ahead rock and roll album. When I heard this album as a 14-year-old, it opens up with Who Loves the Sun, a sunshiny pop album opener song, and anybody listening to that, and if that's all they heard, would get the wrong impression of the Velvet Underground. Did they sell out with that song? I don't think so. Lou Reed, his influences definitely show from his days at Pickwick, where he was a staff writer. He wrote pop throwaway hits along with John Cale. Who Loves the Sun is one of those, but it's a good song. And then Sweet Jane opens with this crazy South American-y kind of opening, and I can't play it for you, but for like 15 seconds, and then you hear feedback, and then it goes into straight, plain old, hard rock and roll of Sweet Jane. Everyone knows the song Sweet Jane. Everyone knows the song Sweet Jane. It's just plain old. Which is not true. That is not the Sweet Jane on that album. The Sweet Jane on that album, Loaded, is... The first version is the live version, and anyone who ever learns to play Sweet Jane plays it more of the... and not the more subtle... Going on to rock and roll, about Lou Reed's love of plain old 50s rock and roll. He even objects to the liner notes, he says, on the Take No Prisoners album, and there are very few liner notes on this album. One of the reasons why I just never picked it up on vinyl, especially because I own my original CD, which sounds fine, and the Rhino Deluxe Edition, which sounds glorious, and also the Peel It Slowly and See box set, which has all of their recorded output, including demos. But I bought this probably simply just so I could actually peel the banana, which you can't do for some reason on their first album, Reissues. It's not there. You can't. Why wouldn't they put a color form? Color form. That was a toy in the 60s. It's basically some kind of plastic that sticks on stuff. And there's the shockingly pink banana, as they always write in copy. Cover by Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was the producer on this album. A lie! He didn't do anything. Tom Wilson is credited as a producer on one of these songs. I do not know how much he actually produced, so it just said Sunday Morning. But the director of engineering is Val Valentin, and he is a staff producer at MGM Verve. Most likely, he probably is the guy who produced this album. This was VCLT, Four Men with Beards copy by Chris Fitzgerald, one of the first VCLT packages I ever received. So, Velvet Underground and Nico. This album is nothing like this album. This album is straight ahead rock and roll. Cool It Down, just a good rock and roll song. New Age is just... again, there's a reason why alt-rock 90s bands clung to the Velvet Underground, because it's so varied and so guitar-driven and really just a few chords on each song. New Age was supposed to go on for like the last line of the song was supposed to go on for like minutes, and it doesn't on this version. It's truncated. However, on the deluxe edition, it does. This version is better of New Age. However, Sweet Jane also has a middle 8. It has a bridge. heavenly wine and roses. It goes like that. That's on this version also. I agree with the producer to cut that section out. I think the song is better on here, not including that bridge part. Lou Reed disagrees. That is the version that you can find on the live 1969 album. That is the version that I forgot the name. It's a female group that sang Sweet Jane. Keep saying Dixie Chicks, but it's not the Dixie Chicks. Damn it! Oh, it'll probably come back to me, and you're probably yelling it right now. Last album, first album. This is what you would call art rock, I guess. Now I don't know. It's definitely not commercial. Certainly not like I Found a Reason, which is just a straight up love ballad. You wouldn't hear anything like that. Head Held High, though. Rockin' song, Lonesome Cowboy Bill, about William Burroughs. They say, is that true? Don't know. Lou Reed said a lot of things to journalists. Not all of them were true. Train Coming Around the Bend, and Oh Sweet Nothing. Oh Sweet Nothing, I think, is sung by Doug Yule. For a long time, I didn't realize Lou Reed didn't sing all the songs. Doug Yule sang a lot of the songs. Like he sang a lot of songs on the third album, Velvet Underground, self-titled. This is a folk rock album, though it still has some interesting divergence into art alternative-y, whatever. But the thematic elements of this, while safe, are not safe on the third album. Candy Says is about a transsexual not happy with having the body parts that they got. And this version, all the songs kind of link together. They definitely work as a whole because, you got Jesus ending side one, going into on side two, beginning to see the light. And then I'm Set Free. And picking up the experimental artness, the last, second to last song, The Murder Mystery, in stereo, the only way to have this album. One channel is playing one thing, one channel is playing the other thing. The lyrics are completely different on both sides. If you play with your stereo controls, you can hear what one is saying together. It's just a collage of words. Fantastic. I can't say enough good things about this album. While this was my introduction to the Velvet Underground, that is not my favorite album, nor is the first album, which most hipsters would pick. Brian Eno is credited as saying that only 1,000 people bought Velvet Underground and Nico, but every one of them started a band. Is that true? Don't know. Nobody knows if that's really true. It might be just part of the lore now. So Nico sings on 3 songs, forced by Andy Warhol to play with them. And he said, well, why don't you get a girl to sing? And why don't you have Nico sing? German, she was in a Fellini movie, La Dolce Vita, for a small bit. Projections were put on the band while they played as part of the Exploding Plastic Inevitable, a Andy Warhol sponsored art music happening is what they would call it. There was a guy dancing with a whip, which you can not see so well on this cover. I think this was shot by the guy ran Anthology Film Archives, Jonas Mekas, famous underground filmmaker. He made video diaries, basically. So, we've already talked about this album and this album. For its time, and even now, the themes on this album are shocking. Talking about heroin and talking about scoring heroin, but in mixed, and Venus and Furs is about S&M, but then mixed into that is Sunday Morning, which is just a pleasant, pretty song, and so is There She Goes Again. But then it's also got the refrain, "You better hit her," which is like, all right. Black Angel's Death Song. All of you people know about the Velvet Underground. I don't have to tell you. So you know that John Cale played the electric viola as well as played bass and keyboards. And that Mo Tucker, one of the first female drummers in a rock band. Not the first, but, not as a novelty either. Along with Sterling Morrison's very good guitar work. Sterling Morrison, a friend from college of Lou Reed's. Chris, so what is your favorite Velvet Underground album? Well, you might have guessed, if you know the Velvet Underground, it would be White Light, White Heat. Unless you get the like an actual vinyl version, you see it's actually black on black. See, there's a tattoo of a skull ring. I believe that was also done by, maybe by Warhol? I don't know. It says produced by Tom Wilson. I don't believe it. I don't think Tom Wilson had anything to do with this album at all, except put his name on it. This album is noise. It's just noise. It's crazy rock and roll noise. The Gift is also an experiment. It's got a short story on one channel by Lou Reed, and on the other is their warm-up song called Booker T. Lady Godiva's Operation. It's a weird kind of hammer horror body Videodrome sexual. Oh, it's crazy. And then Here She Comes Now is just I don't even know how to describe these songs. I don't. That's why I'm not a professional music reviewer. But I Heard Her Call Her Name has just the greatest guitar break I've ever heard in my life. It's sloppy and just noise and adrenaline. And Sister Ray is about famously a smack-filled orgy with nuns and just crazy sex and drugs and hypnotic. They said they knew that they'd only have one shot. Famously, they told the engineer just hit record and left, and what came out is what's on the album. Is that true? I don't know. Certainly sounds it, because I mean it's noisy. It's and it's just 3 chords. So how could you keep that up for 17 minutes? It's crazy. I mean, crazy. Loud, beyond lo-fi. It's no-fi. And when I bought this album on vinyl, even though I didn't need it, even though I already had a CD copy of it, even though it's already on the box set. That album meant so much to me that I needed to have it on vinyl. I love these compilations. VU, was it a collection of previously unreleased recordings, and then another View. Yeah. And these are outtakes. This would have been the 1969 album for MGM Verve before they were dropped. Sundays came out with a version of it. These have digital reverb. That doesn't bother me. I can't really tell to my ear. It's not like a big deal. But that did offend some people, that it's got a slightly modern sheen to it. They were ahead of their time. And then their lore grew over the years. They did have a reunion after John Cale and Lou Reed patched up a little bit, and they worked on songs for Drella when Andy Warhol died. The producer of The Velvet Underground, and Nico, otherwise known as the Banana Album, but not really. When he died, they did a performance art rock album together called Songs for Drella. They thought, we could work together. And so they did a reunion tour in '93, I think it was. This album is a document of it. This album is not great. I appreciate that they tried. They ended up hating each other, and I think after it was just a few dates, 6 dates, 8 dates, a few months, I don't know. I don't remember. They couldn't even keep it together to come to America. They broke up. Once again, vowing never to work together. So, what did we learn from this 20-minute ramble? That Chris likes the Velvet Underground. That it's super important to my musical journey, as it is to most people. Anybody in New York who liked music in the 90s certainly knew the Velvet Underground and was a huge influence on them. Anybody who likes alternative 90s rock can owe everything to the Velvet Underground. Every album is different by the Velvet Underground. All 4 albums sound completely different from each other. Like, they're not the same band at all. And that's due to the diverging, talents in the band. I mean, all 4 of them were completely different. John Cale had a classical background and then an experimental background with Lamont Young, and made music with, Terry Riley, crazy stuff. We've got electric viola, right? Then you got Lou Reed, who's loved for 50s doo-wop, even though that doesn't shine. You got the Andy Warhol hanging around that art crowd, and all of the people that they met and who they wrote about. Candy on Candy Says, she shows up as Candy on Walk on the Wild Side. Same transvestite. So lots of songs about all the different people in the Warhol circles and that they were friends with. And then you go into John Cale leaving the group over tensions with Lou Reed, and the 3rd album completely different. Folk album, though different. I mean, alt folk rock. It's different. It's not. You can't even call it folk, but that's what it, I guess, would be if you had to classify it. And then, out of left field, Loaded for hits. They wanted to finally sell records because nobody bought Velvet Underground records. That's why the originals are so hard to find. So, 22 minutes, haven't said a damn thing. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Talk to me in the comments. I've certainly got plenty to say about the Velvet Underground, just not in the video. Okay.